Hi, my name is Adam Leskis. I'm an SRE at MentionMe, which is a customer advocacy platform, SaaS platform based in London here in the UK. And today I'll be talking about DevEdOps. I'll start with a little bit about myself and my own journey into DevOps, then transition into some things that cognitive psychology can tell us about learning tech stuff or learning anything, really. After that, we'll look at some ways that the DevOps principles, the 3 ways, can help us to actualize those things. And finally, we'll look at some examples of what DevEdOps looks like in practice, which I'm sure you've never seen because I basically just made the term up. So I've always been a builder. This is me in college creating a makeshift hot tub in our dorm room, in our suite, in our bathroom. And I can tell you that there had not been an explicit policy against creating makeshift hot tubs in the dorm bathrooms when I arrived at college, but there definitely is now. But I've always loved building things, tinkering, just, seeing what you could do. And also in a former life, I was a teacher. I always loved the energy in the classroom, interacting with the students, co-constructing knowledge, all of that stuff. And I saw that we were creating a lot of materials manually, things like the worksheets, things like the lists of things, the gap fills, just the general activities. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could automate this a little bit? So I started teaching myself programming. I started with Ruby just to see, what I could automate. And I ended up making this thing, very simple, very basic web app for a job application at the University of Reading. This SPSIE framework was something that they asked me to demo teaching to the students. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if, even after the lesson, there was something that were free and available for them to practice a bit more afterwards, right? Just on their own, sort of consolidate the knowledge. And so I'll show you that now. So again, really simple, really basic. You just kind of click on one of the personas and you reorder the statements into the correct order. The situation, doctor looks like a situation. Of course it is. Oh no, I didn't. Let me try that again. There we go. Good. Let's see. Problem, lab coat, obviously. How about that? And there we go. Oh, perfect. I did it, right? So really simple, really easy, and easy to tell when you've completed it. So I made that, and that was my first attempt at something that I'm now calling DevEdOps. And yeah, had a lot of fun building it. And I was having so much fun, in fact, that I decided to transition into tech. I started as a web developer, really, really enjoyed it. And I kept kind of building these things. So here's me presenting at a conference, a JS Oxford meetup group in the UK. And I think this particular activity, don't ask me why I called it Anne Red. I have no idea. Thought it was pretty cool at the time. I couldn't tell you what it means now. But it's weird. It's like a wall of text thing. But I think I was hitting the Reddit API for the story prompt subreddit, getting the stories, and then taking out all the definite and indefinite articles and switching them with these select boxes. Just another kind of thing to work on, practicing sort of skills. If I had to pick the 2 foundational textbooks for DevEdOps, I'd probably choose these 2, The Programmer's Brain and The Phoenix Project. Really excellent books. The Programmer's Brain by Dr. Felina Hermans, and one of the key takeaways that I really liked, that really resonated with me, was this idea that repeated deliberate practice is the thing that actually consolidates the learning. It moves things into long-term memory, frees up the working memory, and it's what actually leads to the learning, instead of, say, just input, just reading things, knowledge about things. No, the book makes a very, very good and convincing argument that it's actually this deliberate practice. And it also mirrors something that I found in my training and experience as a teacher, is that basically familiar things are easy, unfamiliar things are hard. So after we practice them a number of times, they become familiar. That's basically it, right? They're in long-term memory. You know about it. It's almost automatic. Another one of the really interesting things sort of about chunking from the book and moving things into long-term memory is this research experiment about chessboard placement. There was a Dutch psychologist named Adrian de Groot, and he was looking at the ways that advanced and novice chess players could recreate placement of chess pieces on a board. And what he found, perhaps unsurprisingly, is that the advanced chess players were much better at recreating these historical situations from previous games. But then he changed the experiment a little bit, and he found that if he placed the pieces instead of like they were in historical real games, if you just place them totally randomly, then the advantage of the expert players completely vanished. And he thought, well, why could this be? And what he found out was it basically had to do with chunking. So I'll show you an example of that now. So if you are, like me, a novice chess player, and you were asked to recreate this board, how many things do you think you'd have to remember to recreate it? And you'd probably say, maybe 7 things, right? You take a look at it, think like, well, there are 7 things that are sort of outside the normal starting position, so it's probably 7 things, right? But if you're an advanced chess player, it's actually only 3 things, because everything in the green circle here is what's known as the Ruy Lopez, also called the Spanish opening. It's something that chess players, when they get to an advanced level, have seen lots of times. They've probably studied it. They've memorized it, like a lot of other openings. So it's just something that's moved into their long-term memory. They've chunked it, so now that acts as one set piece that they can remember. And then it's easier for them to remember that plus other minor combinations of these 2 pawns, right? So that's chunking. Now, how do we actually turn these things, these ideas, the chunking, the long-term memory, how do we help ourselves practice that? Well, I think DevOps has some fantastic lessons in that regard. So you could look at the Phoenix project. I suppose you could look at things like the Unicorn project or the DevOps handbook. I mean, anything that talks about the 3 ways, right? I'm sure everyone is watching this is pretty familiar with the 3 ways, but I'll just kind of go over them very quickly. The first way is all about that flow, moving things through the pipeline, reducing batch size and lead time, right? Fast, smaller and faster. The second way is about getting feedback, sort of ties into the first way. As you're moving things through faster, you're getting feedback faster from the system of how the things are doing when you send them to production or wherever you're sending them, right? And the third principle is kind of about culture, but generally this focus on learning and experimentation and turn these local discoveries into global knowledge, right? And one thing that I think is really well said is that the whole idea is that the value is provided when the software is actually running in production, serving users. And so these 3 ways are all about, well, how can we do that safer and faster and more effectively, move software into production? This is a graphic, I'm sure you've seen this too, but I like it as a visual demonstration. So the first way is kind of moving things from left to right. The second way is getting feedback from right to left. And the third way is just those iterative little loops. I like to think of them as sort of expanding concentric circles, but I guess that would have been too big for this diagram. So again, how do we make things familiar, right? If we look at the lessons from Programmer's Brain, it's all about practice. And how do you get practice? Well, for example, for me as an SRE, I get to practice responding to incidents during incidents. It's a great time to learn about the system. Fortunately, it doesn't happen that frequently, but unfortunately, it doesn't happen that frequently, right? Because it's such a good way to learn about the system, if I don't get that practice very frequently, like it just seems like it'd be nicer if I could get more practice, right? And I think other people have also found this, that, well, it's actually very nice to practice when you're not in a production system, when you can't actually hurt anything. So DevEdOps, that I think is one potential answer. I picked a Phoenix randomly as the mascot. I don't know. Seemed pretty good. But yeah, so let's look at this. Like, what does this look like? What are we talking about? Well, I propose the first way of DevEdOps, which is sort of this idea of batch size, keep it small. We're sort of thinking about the actual learning objective, right? So we're not talking about learning about the entire system, about an entire process. It's discrete. It's very small. We'll look at some examples of that in a second. And the lead time is basically how quickly can you go from accessing the learning material to actually practicing the learning objective. I think we saw with the previous web app, the SPSIE, that it was very quick, right? You load it up, click on a persona, and you're off to the races. The second way, leading on from the first way, if you are focusing on very specific learning objectives, it's very easy for the system to automatically assert against that, right? Either those 5 statements are in the correct order, or they're not. For other things, like for example, we'll look at MongoDB replica sets in a little bit. It's a little more difficult. There isn't really a binary state, but you can sort of prompt the learner, the user, to look at the state of the system, and that should provide you with the feedback. So, for example, if you're upgrading all the replica set members, either they're all upgraded or they're not, right? Which, again, is another very useful learning objective, because we, as humans, as operators in the system, often need to inspect the configuration and think, well, is this right? Is it not? So getting practice doing that is never a bad thing. And then finally, the third way, I think everyone would agree that the best way to learn something is to teach it. And I would take it even a step further, and I would say the best way to learn something is to build something to teach it. Because if you're actually building and you have to construct these rules yourself, you really need to dig in there. And then you've got something that you can share with other people, right? Very much third way, right? Taking local discoveries and making them global. So yeah, I would encourage you to create something and share it with the world. I think it's very, very valuable. So again, if we return to that initial web app, is it really a web app? I guess maybe. And look at it in the DevEdOps framing, I think we could definitely see how it's related to the first way, very specific learning objective, right? Organizing those statements in the rhetorical sort of structure. The second way, it's giving that automated feedback, very immediate, right? You don't have a human in the loop, so it's very, very fast. And clearly aligned with the third way, that it's there, it's public, it's available on the internet for free, anytime, anywhere, and anybody could interact with it. Now, I know what you're saying. Oh, you want to see more examples of DevEdOps? Well, you're in luck, because I got some, and I'm going to show you. So this is something that I built for myself after starting out as a web developer, and I was working with some AWS network engineers who would constantly ask about, oh, which security groups do you need us to open up? And they would talk about IP addresses and ports, and I had no idea what they were talking about. So I thought, well, okay, I'm going to build something for myself to learn, and while I'm building something for myself to teach myself, why don't I build something to teach other people if they're interested, right? So I built this thing. I'll show it to you now. And boom, lead time is basically zero. Like, we've accessed it. It's there. And you can see my a million tabs, which whatever, no shame. But yeah, so it's basically, is it public or not public? I think that's public. Oh, turns out I'm right. How about this one? Oh, that's definitely not public. That's in a private range. All 127s, that's all not public. That I think is public. Oh no, the testnet 3 range, right? Gets me every time. So anyway, that's kind of just a quick example of something that's, yeah, very, very small focused learning objective. Is it public? Is it not public? And the lead time is very short, right? You enter the site, you go right into it. And it's for free. Like, you could check this out. You could use it. I don't know. Like, it's there. It doesn't technically run free forever. I mean, as long as Netlify is gracious enough to provide me, with infrastructure. But you could just move it somewhere else, I guess, if you want. Or you could even run it locally. That's also cool. The second thing, JQ Pilot. I was at a previous role, and I had two colleagues who were very, very good at JQ. I was very jealous. And so I thought, well, I wanted to get better at JQ. So I need to practice this stuff, right? And of course, you've seen this story before. If I want to practice it, I want to learn it, I need to teach it. And if I'm going to teach it, I might as well build something to teach it. So the whole idea is, how do you actually run these JQ commands, right? That's what everybody always forgets. This does have a UI component, I'll show you in a second, that sort of scaffolds the instruction a little bit, and I'll talk about that. But yeah, you can clone this, you can run it locally. It is available at this website. So, oh no, actually, sorry, I'm not going to show you that. Let me just play a recording that I made. That'll be much easier than me trying to remember the commands and interact with it. So yeah, on the left you can see the input, the JSON structure, and you can see what you expect it to be. Now you might say, well, hold on, isn't this giving you the answer? Well, no, because the actual learning objective is all in the transformation. I think that's a very effective, authentic way to think about it, because oftentimes you're working with, say, the AWS Fargate API, and you want to count the number of tasks, or you're hitting a billing API and you want to sum up all the costs, right? And so you know what you want it to be at the end. Like, that's not a thing you need to practice. You already know that. What you need to practice is how you're going to transform it. Are you going to use a sum? Are you going to group by? Are you going to select? Are you going to map? Are you going to filter? All that stuff. So yeah, so I think the UI helps out in that regard. And yeah, this actually, I built this using Go to sort of to teach myself Golang a little bit better. So I'm kind of marginally better now. I'm still not very good. But it's running, for free on Render, I think it is. You can run containers for free. Super, super cool. I highly recommend it as a DevEdOps platform. And the third thing that I wanted to show you, I guess there's nothing really much to show. It's just this GitHub repo. But I was working, again, in a previous role with MongoDB replica sets, and I thought, well, we have to do things like upgrade them, which involves taking replica set members out of the replica set and restarting the MongoDB process, and that's kind of scary and risky, and I don't know, and because you don't want to mess something up in production, right? You take down production, and you also don't really want to do it even in a staging environment, which is not the end of the world, but I mean, maybe you interrupt somebody else's work and you have to stop and fix it, and that's not super nice. So I thought, well, why don't I create like a dojo, a totally isolated practice area, right, for myself, like a sandbox to mess around with that kind of stuff. So that's what I did. And for this one, I think this is an example of a bit more complex of a learning outcome where you're not asserting against one particular thing. It's a series of steps that you can follow that's all in the README for the repo for each of the different activities. And at the end, either you have the correct state or you don't. And again, you can run this for free on any system. There's no web component for this, but it runs on any system with virtualization involved or enabled, I should say, for the VMs. It's also got some activities with just pure containers, like if you want to just create indexes, like you don't need VMs for that because you don't need to restart the MongoDB process. So yeah, very cool stuff. So you might say, well, what does the future of DevEdOps look like? Where do we go from here? You're hungry. You want to know more. Well, I think, first of all, a very valid criticism is that if it's just people designing these individual learning materials, well, that's going to take a really, really long time, right? So, okay, so that's fair. So maybe it looks like LLM agents helping to scaffold out and deploy these customized learning materials, right? Could be, yeah. Like maybe you tell it sort of what you want to learn and where you want to practice and those sorts of things. I mean, I think those possibilities are very exciting. Maybe it looks like disposable, cloud learning environments, like on Gitpod or something, with personalized chaos monkey scenarios for maybe the input you give it a particular stack and programming languages, or maybe a system architecture, and then it kind of designs the system for you, and you can break it and fix it, and maybe it randomizes the break. I don't know, any kind of really cool stuff like that. I think is very exciting. Or it could even be really out there, like a totally immersive VR environment where you can sort of walk through a subnet and see packets flying around, and you grab them with your hands and you can peel them like onions and be like Tom Cruise in Minority Report. In anything like that. I mean, I think one of the key takeaways that I want to emphasize is there's so many possibilities in the medium of tech that I don't think have been explored yet. So I think there are lots of unexplored areas that we could definitely look at in terms of learning, teaching and learning these sorts of things. So yeah, I think the merger of sort of these lessons from cognitive psychology and DevOps they work very well together, and they lead us to these auto-generated learning environments. And when I say auto-generated learning environments, I basically mean something that you don't have to create manually, something that's there, something that's repeatable, something that's automated, right? I mean, these are all DevOps ideas with automated feedback. And so, yeah, that's what I think the main takeaway of DevEdOps, the movement that I just made up, is. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, and I'd love to collaborate on DevEdOps stuff or anything related to stuff that I've talked about today. Thanks again to Michael Cade for setting this all up. This was a lot of fun, and yeah, thanks. See you later. Bye-bye.